So session 5 rolls around and everyone but Zuko can make it. This doesn't bother the DM so much as his character is super removed from the rest of the party, so for now he's totally cool with it. Anyways, the DM recognizes that Katara hasn't really gotten a ton of attention lately, so he comes up with a scenario that will potentially highlight Katara, though there's room for the other players to intervene in her stead. The party finds this earthbender, but he runs when he's approached, so the party inadvertently follow him back to his village, and they learn bending is outlawed there. Sokka sees Fire Nation soldiers on his perception check and tells everyone to act naturally, including the NPC named Haru, but unfortunately everyone fails, but the guards let it slide. Later on, the NPC Haru is arrested, and Katara steps up with a plan to get arrested in order to then free Haru. The DM, again, has everyone roll deception during this ruse, and it must not be their night because both Katara and Sokka fail. But despite that, the DM lets Sokka kind of RP Katara's failure into a success. The party then plans out a rescue mission, which initially fails, due once again to a poor persuasion check by Katara, but the party smuggles in some coal, and this time Katara is able to persuade the prisoners to rise up and rebel, with advantage given to her by the coal. This also serves as a way to give Aang and the others a taste of what earthbending can really do, and Aang, seeing this, is super pumped to learn earthbending, but recognizes that he needs to learn waterbending first, and Katara could also use that experience as well. It is next up and their current objective anyways. The session comes to a close, though, after some brief combat in which everyone shows what they're capable of. Session 6 begins, and this time everyone will be there but Sokka and Katara will be arriving quite a bit later. So for the first couple hours, it's just Zuko and Aang at the table, and the two are curious to see what the DM has in store for them. The DM recognizes that the last handful of sessions have been pretty uneventful in terms of the greater narrative, so the DM preps a very plot-driven session. For Aang, the DM comes up with this idea of the spirit world, and the DM figures Aang would probably have learned about this in his training as a monk, and has him roll a religion check to recall, but unfortunately he rolls very low and has no idea what this stuff is. The DM has Aang and, by extension, the party go to a town that is attacked nightly by a strange, hostile spirit. Aang has no idea what to do with the spirit and tries to speak with it, but unfortunately there's no success. The DM describes the spirit as this horrifying creature, and the creature begins to destroy the village. Aang is committed to trying to calm the beast, but unfortunately can't roll higher than a 10 on his religion check, and the beast attacks Aang for insane amounts of damage. The DM has a copy of Sokka's character sheet, so he has Sokka joining the battle, so Aang isn't killed. Aang is still really committed to a non-violent approach, though, and attempts to convince the DM-controlled Sokka to stand down. The DM can tell that Aang isn't super keen on the forced combat, so he has the spirit take Sokka prisoner and leave the village, and Aang gives chase. At this point, the DM changes focus to Zuko, who hasn't played that much, especially recently, so the DM plans to not only give Zuko an interesting story for the first half of session, but also plans to reunite him with the rest of the party once everyone else has arrived. Zuko has grown really close with the uncle NPC, so the DM has the uncle go missing. Zuko rolls high on his survival check and finds out that the uncle has been taken by earthbenders. Zuko is pumped to be fighting NPCs again, as a majority of his fights have been against the party. Anyway, the DM has Zuko roll periodic investigation checks to keep the trail of the uncle's capturers. Back to Aang, the DM has him roll a strength saving throw to try to yank Sokka free from the spirit's grasp. He fails and is knocked unconscious. The DM at this point forces Aang into the spirit world in the hopes that Aang can continue his non-violent approach. Ultimately, the DM hoped that Aang would just fight the spirit, but is down to let Aang try and figure this out. Aang is really struggling to figure this out, so the DM creates a spirit dragon to guide Aang. He has the spirit take Aang to the ultimate location for the session, a temple dedicated to the previous avatar. Again, the fight with the spirit was just supposed to be a holdover until Sokka and Katara arrived, but now it's become this whole thing, and the DM resolves to have Aang roll one last religion check, and he succeeds, ending the whole shebang. There's still a bit of time until Sokka and Katara get to session, though, so the DM returns to Zuko, and he and the uncle NPC have a fight with the Earthbenders. It's relatively short, but Zuko manages to come out on top. He resumes his hunt for the Avatar, having seen Appa earlier that very same session. Finally, Katara and Sokka make it to session, and Aang brings them up to speed. He tells them that they need to get to a temple on a Crescent Island, and Aang also tells them that the island is in the Fire Nation. Everyone's immediately put on edge. They did not expect to be in the Fire Nation until much later, so this prospect is very, very scary for them. Sokka is totally down for this, though, as hopefully it means a chance for some intense moments of combat. Zuko, who is also at the table, can hear all this, and he's also scared too. He had written in his backstory that he isn't allowed to return to the Fire Nation. If he wants to confront the Avatar, he'll have to risk quite a bit. The party make their way to the Fire Nation with haste, and the DM knows that ultimately Aang will be able to speak with Roku regardless, but to add some urgency, he tells them that they need to get there in the next in-game day. So the party is just hauling ass. Zuko is hot on their trail, and for the DM this is perfect. He's been sitting on a certain enemy NPC that he's excited to bring back. As the players are moving, the DM describes that just ahead of them is this massive blockade, and the DM has the uncle NPC remark to Zuko that those ships belong to Commander Zhao. Zuko tenses up. He was lucky to beat Zhao the last time, but now he has a whole fleet of ships. The party seems tense as Zuko tenses up. If this guy's got Zuko scared, they should also be concerned. The battle music comes on and Zuko readies a shot. Not for Zhao, but for the party. The DM was hoping that they'd find Zhao a common enemy, but not so, apparently. Zuko is so in character, he thinks the Avatar is still more important. Team Avatar hatches a plan where they'll all work together. The DM hasn't really run combat with Appa yet, so he's a little nervous, but the party's got it all figured out. Aang guides Appa, Katara keeps an eye out, and Sokka is down with making sure Appa doesn't get too singed. Zuko is on his boat and decides to run the blockade and continue his chase for the Avatar. The DM is pumped. He wants Zuko to follow, but he has the uncle NPC warn against it, but Zuko pushes on anyways. The DM has Aang make an animal handling check, and he manages to guide Appa through most of the fireballs. Appa does take some damage though, but the party presses on. One of the fireballs collides with Zuko's ship, damaging the engines. Zuko orders them to press onwards anyways. Another volley. Aang makes another animal handling check, this time failing, and Appa takes a direct hit. The party must make dexterity saves to hold on, and unfortunately Sokka fails and is launched off of Appa. The party guides Appa down to grab him, and the DM has Katara make another dex save to grab onto Sokka. She succeeds grabbing him on and pulling him back onto Appa. Zuko's ship is left unscathed. Another volley, one more animal handling check. Aang fails and a massive fireball approaches. Aang asks the DM to attack the fireball, and the DM agrees. Aang rolls to hit. A natural 20, critical hit, destroying the rock. They've made it through the blockade. Zuko, however, has still yet to cross over. The DM wants Zuko and the gang to meet up, and he wants Zhao to follow them and meet the party as well. Hoping that this might bring Zuko and the rest of the party together, he has Zhao let them pass. After a bit of downtime, the party makes it to the temple. The DM creates a friendly monk character to guide the party through the temple, though through him, they learn a little bit of lore about the Fire Nation. Not all of them agree with the war. They reach the chamber, but the door is closed, and the monk explains that only 5 firebenders can open the door. And Sokka has a brilliant idea. He creates some fire bombs to create a fake firebending effect, in the hopes that it'll work on the door. The DM has Sokka roll a survival check, and it's a 13, which successfully creates the bombs, but they aren't authentic enough to fool the door. At this point, Sokka is a little disappointed, but Katara, who up until now hasn't contributed that much to the session, comes up with another idea. The bombs didn't work, but they looked like they did. The monk can go grab some of the other monks and tell them that Aang has gotten through. Hopefully they'll open the door and detain him, and while that's happening, Aang can actually sneak inside. The DM likes this idea a lot, but takes this moment to cut back to Zuko. He has Zuko roll a number of stealth checks, one to evade Zhao, one to evade the monks at the temple, and one again to sneak up on the rest of the party. Zuko fails the first, but succeeds on the other two, able to apprehend Aang before he can get into the now open chamber room. The other monks apprehend the rest of the party as well. Aang isn't fully restrained though, and manages to break out of Zuko's grasp and enter the room. The DM really needs to get this information to the players, so he makes up some nonsense about how, despite Zuko and the 5 other monks bending to open the door, Roku doesn't want them to interrupt. Zuko's a little peeved by this, but lets it slide, and just gives his character another thing to be mad about. Anyways, Aang and the DM begin to roleplay with one another, and the DM has Roku set a timer on the campaign. Roku tells Aang that he has to learn all the elements and defeat the Fire Lord before in-game summer's end. Winter has only just ended, so the party has time, but the DM wants to introduce a little bit more urgency into the campaign, and really wants the party to focus up a little bit. During all this, Zhao shows up and introduces himself to the party. Zuko attempts to resist, but Zhao has too many soldiers at his side. The DM's plan is for Zuko and the others to be detained by Zhao, and they'll have to work together to get out of it. Again, hopefully, finally, putting the two parties together. Unfortunately, though, for the DM's plan, Aang asks Roku if he can help his friends escape, and the DM initially is about to say no, but Aang asks if Roku can control Aang through the Avatar state. The DM keeps forgetting about this pesky Avatar state ability, but after some thought, he kind of likes this idea. So he quickly retcons the Avatar state as all the previous Avatars acting through Aang. Aang busts out of the room and frees Katara and Sokka. Zuko manages to break free as well, and leaves the building, leaving the rest of the party behind. Aang, Katara, and Sokka escape as well, and the session ends. Everyone is super on edge. They've now been given a timer over the entire campaign. They aren't sure if they'll be able to get it done in time. The DM is privately really upset that Zuko and the others didn't finally join forces this session like he wanted, but he resigns that it might just take a little bit more time for that to happen. Only a little bit, though. He's confident in his ability to make it happen sooner rather than later. Next session comes around, and after the last session, everyone makes it a point to be at this session. Session starts and everyone is still on edge. They're still more than a little unsure about how to proceed. Katara knows some waterbending, so she suggests that she teach Aang what she knows. The DM has both Aang and Katara roll intelligence checks. Aang succeeds with flying colors, but Katara rolls low on her checks. Aang picks up on waterbending very quickly, but Katara actually isn't that great at waterbending herself. The DM is looking to reunite Zuko with the rest of the party, so he has the Uncle NPC take their ship back into port for a Lotus tile. The DM wants to add a little bit of lore here, but we'll worry about the details later. He just wants to plant the seeds in the hopes that at the very least, Zuko will pursue it at some point. The party heads into town to purchase some supplies for the road, and the DM describes a sketchy-looking pirate ship that's docked. Aang, who at this point has got a handle on the necessary metagaming aspect of D&D, he bites. The party looks around and Katara finds a waterbending scroll, and the DM is hopeful that this will put them at ease going forward. They can't afford it, though. And while Aang rolls low on his persuasion check, Katara rolls high on her sleight of hand check and steals the scroll, and they leave, but not before a brief chase through the city. The DM returns to Zuko and has Iroh's NPC check out the same pirate shop that was traveled by the party. Zuko overhears the shopkeepers talking about Aang and questions them for info. Zuko eventually convinces the pirates to help them find the party. The party takes a long rest and Katara wakes up and tests out the scroll. She rolls low on her stealth check, though, and Zuko finds her. The two have a lengthy RP session just between the two of them, and things get a little steamy at a couple of points. But the DM is keen on getting the session moving, so he has the pirates get impatient. Zuko threatens the pirates and has them search the forest. Sokka and Aang are ambushed as they wake up and taken to Zuko. Sokka sees an opportunity to pit the two parties against each other, however. He name-drops Aang as the Avatar and convinces the pirates to turn on Zuko with a high persuasion roll. A fight breaks out, and the party is mostly just trying to get away from it all, but the DM has them make a few rolls here and there. The party makes it onto the pirates' boat, and a few pirates follow them on board. Another brief fight breaks out, and the party comes out on top. Zuko is hot on their tail, though, and everyone is approaching a waterfall. Aang and Katara make a few checks with their waterbending, but fail. As they fall, Aang quickly checks his inventory and sees he bought a bison whistle earlier that very same session. In a moment of desperation, he uses it, and Appa comes just in time to save the party. Zuko, unfortunately, loses his boat. The session ends and everyone is a little more at ease going forward. Knowing that the DM is on their side, everyone looks forward to next week. Session 8, and once again, Zuko cannot make it. He won't be making it to session for a while, actually, which peeves the DM, but he understands that people are busy, so he lets it slide, but he really stresses that Zuko should try to make it to every session he can. The DM is kind of filling time for these next couple sessions until he can have everyone at the table again, as he can't really continue the main plot without Zuko, so this session is arguably entirely filler. There's a lot of attention on Sokka as the DM introduces an NPC named Jet for the party to encounter. Jet represents the extreme end of the war and what the party could become if they don't keep their morality in check. Jet is quite literally a murder hobo, which the DM would like for the party to avoid going forward. There's a lot of roleplay, some fun combat, but the session ends with the party coming out on top. Regardless of the filler session, everyone ultimately has a good time. Looking forward to next week. Thank you guys for watching part 2 of my Avatar, but if it was D&D. Part 3 should be coming out pretty soon. I know this one took a little bit longer than I was hoping, but hopefully I can make it a little more consistent going forward. But yes, once again, thank you guys so much for watching, and take care of yourselves.